news for live sport. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the show on the platform you are currently listening to, which will keep you up to date with all future episodes of the SportsBar Life. Feel free to leave a comment on our YouTube page and give us a rating on iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter and our Facebook page with our handle at SportsBar Life. So let's get to our first guest. He is one of the most recognisable names in footy media with 35 years involvement in the game across print, online, radio and TV. Here is Rohan Connolly to discuss Adelaide versus Richmond. Thanks for joining us, Rohan. We certainly look forward to hearing your perspective on the big game.
Pleasure.
Excellent. So, we're now at the Grand Final. It's Adelaide versus Richmond, the number 1 side after the regular season and the number 3 side in Richmond. What are your thoughts on the final series as a whole?
Look, it's probably been a bit disappointing in terms of contests. We've had 8 games now, and with the exception of one, the closest margin in any of them has been 36 points. So certainly hasn't been a reflection of the season. We've probably had the closest season of all time. Greatest number of games decided by less than a goal ever. And the finals have been a bit of a blowout. But look, I think we're seeing the best 2 teams in the competition playing off for the premiership. So I always like that. I like the grand final to be a reflection of the season that we've seen, and I think this one is.
Yeah, I guess both sides have been pretty convincing in their respective finals matches. Would you say that based on that and, as you mentioned, the top 2 sides...
Something, Nathan Broad in defence, Jacob Townsend came in and kicked 11 goals in 2 weeks, and he's again added to that sort of defensive pressure. Jack Graham, a young kid, he's come in and played the last 4 games and again added to that midfield depth. So, there's quite a number of players who have really either sort of turned on the best form of their careers or really sort of settled down and into a lineup and played bigger roles than I think many people would have expected them to play. So it's sort of all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle coming together.
Yeah, it's quite interesting learning all those different players and how they've been able to be effective within the team structure. If we're looking at this game now, this contest in front of us, Adelaide had a comprehensive victory over Richmond earlier in the season. Where do you think this game will be won for each side?
I think for either side it probably comes down to the midfield. And basically, I think, Richmond did very well in the preliminary final to sort of curb the influence of the GWS midfield, and they're a very skilled side, and they prevented them getting the ball on the outside much or having much room. And I think that's probably going to have to be what happens if Richmond are going to beat Adelaide as well. Just not giving them the time to use the ball properly, because they do. They use the ball brilliantly, and they're big on sort of linking up from half back, going through the corridor, finding players free with, little short passes, and then going hell for leather when it gets inside 50 with a huge amount of talent inside that 50. So I think Richmond are going to have to really stack the midfield pressure on, and if they don't, if Adelaide's midfielders like Sloane, the Crouch brothers, Rory Atkins, Paul Seedsman, Richard Douglas, if these guys are allowed to have any sort of room to work with, I'd be pretty confident the Crows will generate enough chances to kick a winning score, because that's the other thing they do. They're very efficient up forward. So they create a lot of opportunities and they score heavily from the opportunities they create. So I think that's the key. Adelaide needs to get the ball out in the open, and I think Richmond needs to keep it in tight. Now, Richmond could keep it in tight and Adelaide could still win, I think, because they're also a bit underestimated, I think, in playing the close-in game. I think they do that very well. They run high for contested ball and clearances, so they can do all those tough things as well. But I think, if Richmond manages to shut down that run, they've got a pretty reasonable chance. And like I said, Adelaide will be looking to get it out in the open as much as possible.
And from your following of the Crows this season, they have played some matches at the MCG. Do you think that their game style is suited to performing well at the G?
Yeah, look, I'd put it this way, I don't think it's not suited. I was having a look at their MCG record the other day, and probably for the last, I reckon 3.5 years, it's actually been pretty good. In fact, I'm just calling up the numbers now. I think from their last 10 games at the MCG, they've only lost 2 of them, and one of them was very narrowly. So, they played the G all right. Look, their last visit there wasn't a great day. They fell, 51 or 52 points behind Collingwood, but even then they managed to come back and save a draw out of it. So, yeah, look, I don't think they're a side that is necessarily worse off, a few goals worse off because they're playing at the MCG. Having said that, it's certainly an advantage for Richmond, obviously, because it's their home ground and they'll have the bulk of the crowd, but they do play pretty well there. I think their record now is 11 wins from 13 games just this year, and the 2 losses were both, by a kick and a bit. So, it's a bigger advantage for Richmond, but I don't think it's a disadvantage necessarily for the Crows.
And with Richmond, they had issues with playing in finals previously where they couldn't get past the first week, and this time around they've had 2 convincing victories. What are your thoughts on their ability to handle the biggest stage of them all, the grand final?
Look, I mean, it's hard to predict sort of what that pressure and the occasion is going to do to different players, but they've played in front of a lot of big crowds this year, and the qualifying final, it was not more than 95,000, and the preliminary final was 94,000. So, the grand final crowd might be a few thousand bigger, but it's not going to be a lot bigger. So, I guess they've already experienced that, and they haven't frozen on the big stage. In both those finals, they've started well, and look, obviously that's going to be a key. You need a good start. But I think I wouldn't expect them to be rattled by the occasion because the 2 finals they've played so far won't be all that different to what they'll experience on Saturday.
And in terms of both sides, they both have some superstars within their lineups. I know you've referenced them earlier, especially when you're talking about the midfield. Can you give an idea of what this opportunity in playing in the grand final would be for them to really elevate themselves in the history of the game?
Massive, I mean, particularly, I guess, someone like Trent Cotchin, he's been at it for a while now, and, he's been captain, and there's been, difficult times for him. Some of the older players, Jack Rewalt's been around as long now as well. But Adelaide as well, I mean, there's no one in that side that, sort of hasn't been through a lot of ups and downs, and, they've got some older players as well who, have been around a good 9 or 10 years, without really tasting success. And, there's no doubt that, there are some great players in the history of the game who were never fortunate enough to play in a premiership side or, in some cases, even the grand final. So it's a massive occasion, and the game never forgets people that play in grand finals and in premierships, and or more importantly, play well in those occasions. And it's why someone like, say, for example, Luke Hodge, who's just retired, is rated so highly because he was consistently good in that biggest occasion. Hodge played in 5 grand finals, and in 4 of them, he was among the best 3 or 4 players on the ground, 1, 2 Norm Smith medals. So I think there's no doubt that playing well on that sort of occasion, takes your reputation up several notches, and it's at the end of your career, it's what people most remember, I think.
I guess for Adelaide, Andrew McLeod sticks out as someone who was able to really do well in the grand final stage.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, another dual Norm Smith winner. There's only been 3 of them, Gary Ayres, Luke Hodge and Andrew McLeod. So it's pretty rarefied territory, and absolutely. I mean, if you can do it consistently and help your side win a premiership, you automatically become a bit of an immortal in that club's history, and you're pretty well remembered by the game as a whole.
For sure. And before we finish, I do want to get your thoughts on the outcome, and I'll save that to the end. But just on a more broader sphere in terms of the event, the grand final as a whole, what are your thoughts on the ticketing allocation regarding the corporates and the members, and how it's all broken up between the different parties?
Oh, look, it's not great. The AFL certainly tried harder in recent years to provide more tickets to members of competing clubs, but, I saw some figures the other day which basically suggest that I think there'll be a total of 95,000 members of both clubs that won't have access to a grand final ticket. It's not that simple, because you've got the Melbourne Cricket Club members who are entitled to a ticket. You've got AFL members, Medallion Club members, who kick in for an Etihad stadium package, which also gets them the grand final ticket. My issue is probably more with the corporate packages that are sold, and I'm told something like an estimate of about 17,000 in every grand final crowd are basically corporates, and unfortunately, they're often people that, don't necessarily go to many games throughout the season, don't barrack for either club, aren't a member of either club. So, my preference would always be to satisfy as many of them as possible. But given the way that, you've got all these different sort of forms of membership, which by, legal rights have to be catered to, it makes it hard. But yeah, look, I'd like to think that'd be one occasion where the AFL could say, enough. No one's going to sell corporate packages. We're going to free up those 17,000 tickets for the members of the competing clubs. I mean, they're the ones who most deserve it. They're the ones that follow those clubs through thick and thin. And, if you had an order of people who most deserve to be there, I'd put them ahead of anyone else.
Yeah, definitely. And with the grand final now seeing 1 versus 3, there was a lot of criticism regarding the week bye before the final series. Do you think that week bye will be eliminated come next season?
No, I don't now, because you've seen both the qualifying final winners win their preliminary finals despite a lack of football. So really, I've been quite big on this one. I'm not a fan of the pre-finals bye at all. But I think given now that, last year both qualifying final winners lost their preliminary finals, and there was more evidence there saying that it was having a negative impact on the way the finals unfolded than you're going to have this year. You're probably not going to be able to tell one way or the other for a few years, but I still think it's something that's unnecessary. I think it potentially disadvantages sides that have worked all year for an advantage. I think that it sort of devalues the importance of the 22-round season, because, if you strive that hard to gain an advantage by finishing up in the top 4, and then you don't have every advantage possible over the sides in the lower half of the 8, it sort of makes finishing higher on the ladder less important, if that makes sense. So I'm not a fan, and I think it was brought in to solve an issue that really wasn't that big a deal, which was, sides who had already qualified for the finals fielding weakened teams in the last game to give guys a break. It happened a handful of times, but I think, out of 200 odd games a year, I don't think it was that big a deal. And I think it was, personally, I think it was far too dramatic a change. So I'm not a fan, but I think what's happened this year will certainly mean that you're not going to see the end of it yet.
Yeah. That's I guess this sort of helps them support keeping it.
Yeah.
Yes, so we'll go to our prediction. So in terms of the Norm Smith medal, who would you say for each side is a good bet for as a smoky?
It depends how you define a smoky, I suppose. But look, one guy who I think is a really key player for Adelaide, and certainly not underestimated. It might not. Like I say, it depends on your definition of a smoky. But I think Rory Laird is a bloke who could potentially be a Norm Smith medalist. I mean, he was just incredible in the preliminary final, and he gives them so much drive off half back and really sets up a lot of attack. And he's a good ball user, and he's got great judgment, and he's eye catching. So I think he's one bloke who could potentially win a Norm Smith medal. As far as the Tigers go, I think pretty hard to go past Dustin Martin, given the sort of form he's been in. I mean, he's just been amazing all year, and he's probably going to win the Brownlow medal, which hasn't been determined yet, but probably going to win it in a canter. So you'd have to say him. Beyond him, I think it's not often defenders have won Norm Smith medals, but I think if Richmond wins, they're going to have shut down Adelaide's forward line pretty effectively. And from that point of view, I'd say someone like Alex Rance will certainly have played a pivotal role in that. And again, he's someone who provides a lot of rebound as well as defends very well, and he's very eye-catching. So he's one I'd be keeping my eye on as well as a potential Norm Smith medalist.
Extending from that, as far as the favourites are concerned, who else would you add to the mix as far as the Norm Smith contenders for each side?
Look, for the Crows, I'd say Eddie Betts. We all know what he's capable of, and explosive, and they don't come much more eye-catching than him, so I would have thought Eddie Betts. Rory Sloane's incredibly consistent, so yeah, you'd have to say he was a pretty decent chance. And for Richmond, Trent Cotchin, again, incredibly consistent, racks up the touches, sets a great example as captain. And look, probably not quite as big a chance, but if Jack Rewalt was to kick a bag of goals for the Tigers, you'd almost certainly say that means they'd win. So, look, if Jack fired and kicked 5 or 6 goals, it'd be certainly different to see a key forward type winning a Norm Smith medal. So perhaps Jack might bob up and deliver the goods.
That'll be huge. And going to the result now, and I want to get your opinion on who's going to win, and also if you can just tell me how many points do you think the teams will score in this match?
Well, look, I'm going for Adelaide. I think they've been the best team all year. They've been on top of the ladder, I think, 17 rounds out of 23. Like I said earlier, they're a high-scoring side. They're the only side this year that's averaged more than 100 points per game, and they've averaged about 2 goals a game more than the next highest-scoring team, which is pretty handy. I think their midfield is hard and brilliant on the outside as well, so I think they cover all bases there. And I think its defence is pretty underrated too. Daniel Talia is a terrific key defender. You've got great rebound, like I said, through the likes of Rory Laird. Jake Weaver's a really terrific sort of floating defender. Jake Kelly does pretty well. So I think in terms of strength right across the ground, they've got the edge pretty much in all departments, I think. So I really can't tip against Adelaide. What sort of game will it be? Well, look, grand finals tend to be not necessarily high scoring. Adelaide did a real number on Richmond earlier in the year and ended up kicking, I think, 21 goals in that game, but that was at their home ground. Grand finals will be tighter and there won't be as many scoring opportunities. So, look, I would have thought it's likely to be won, by a sort of, 13, 14 goals to 11 sort of number. It could be wrong. Conditions will play a big part in that. I mean, if it's a wet day, I don't think you'll see scores even like that. But, I mean, if conditions are okay, that's the sort of scoreline I think Adelaide would end up kicking. And, yeah, look, I'm going for them to win by about, I reckon, about 18 points. Not by a lot, but enough.
Yeah, we'll find out Saturday. And before we go, what's your involvement with the match for this week in terms of all your media involvement?
Well, on the day, I'll be with the SEN team for the grand final, so some pre-match stuff there, and then I'll be the boundary line reporter for them. So I'll be sitting on the boundary and just offering a few observations on the game from there, and keeping track on any injuries and stuff like that, and then the celebrations afterwards, out on the ground and in the rooms afterwards, which is always good fun to be part of. You know, there's a lot of happy people in the midst of any premiership side. Beyond that, look, I'll be writing stuff from my website, footyology.com.au. I'll be pumping out stuff all week so people can catch up with some grand final lead-up stuff there. Post-game, I'll be doing a wrap for the website too, of just, you know, what happened and what it all means. And then I might take a few days break, but not for long, because we've got the trade period coming up only a week after the end of the season, and that's always pretty hectic as well. So won't be having much downtime, but look, it's a really exciting time of year, and it's always a pleasure to be involved in any capacity.
Oh, for sure. And the Footyology podcast, what can our listeners expect this week?
Well, we've recorded this week's one. It should be up online very shortly, hopefully. So, we have a number of segments. That's a wrap, where we talk about the games just gone. We've done a bit of a grand final preview with that as well. We do Hot or Not, which is sort of like highlights or lowlights out of the weekend's football just gone. We do a media watch segment where we talk about the football media, which is always a bit controversial, and we do a rant off at the end where Finey and I just sort of unload whatever is grinding our gears. So that's a bit of fun as well. But we're both crotchety old men, so we can get worked up about a fair bit, really. So look, hopefully if people want to have a listen to that, that'll be up on the Footyology website pretty shortly, hopefully. So you can find it on iTunes as well, or on the SEN website. So, we're going to keep that coming. We'll do a post-grand final episode of that as well.
Okay, fantastic. I'm sure our listeners will be tuning into that. And before we go, what's the best way for our listeners to keep in touch with Rohan Connolly?
Well, look, you can, if you're on the website and you've got any sort of feedback on stuff that's going on there's an email function there, which I can assure you I'll read all the emails that come in, so you can get me that way. I'm pretty frequently, probably far too frequently, on social media, so you can find me on Twitter at Rohan, ROHAN _Connolly, CONNOLLY, or on Facebook, my professional Facebook account, which is Rohan Connolly AFL, and has the blue tick there. So look, social media is probably the best place to find me. I practically live on it these days, so I might take a bit of a break from it over summer, but right now, I'm always attending to it. So anyone who wants to get in touch with me, that's the way to do it.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today, Rohan. It's been great to get all your thoughts and insights into the big game this weekend. Any final comments you'd like to say to our listeners ahead of the match?
Oh, well, just, let's all hope we get a cracking grand final. We've been blessed with grand finals in the modern era, really. We've had some absolute crackers, post-2000. I think last year was an amazing story, and I think either team winning this year would be a great story. Like I said, the finals have seen a few blowouts, so we could probably do with a close game, but I think those sides are close enough to each other to give us that. Good luck to fans of either club and everyone else. Well, we're watching the greatest game in the world. Just remember that when you're watching the grand final, we're lucky to have such a great game in our own backyard, and it's always a pleasure to watch. And grand final day is the biggest of the year, so have a great time watching it, everyone.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm sure they will, and wish you all the best with your call on Saturday.
Oh, no worries. No, pleasure to be involved.
Excellent insight from Rohan, and many interesting points to take from his perspective on not only the game this weekend, but on other hot topics associated with finals football. We now head to Adelaide and chat to the official supporter group of the minor premiers. Here is Kate Bartlett to let us know what the Adelaide Crows supporter group are up to this week ahead of their team taking part in this year's grand final. Kate first informs us of the work involved with facilitating the buses for the Crows members in getting to Melbourne this week.
This week, I'm only filling in to help today, as I've needed helpers. But ever since we won the prelim, they've had thousands and thousands of phone calls, thousands and thousands of messages regarding buses, because Robert Smith, the Vice President of the Pro Supporter Group, has organised 15 buses through grants coaching. So Pro Supporter Group members and non-Pro Supporter Group members can call through and can book on the bus. There's 2 bus times, Thursday night and Friday night. So the Thursday night bus gets you in Friday morning so they can see the parade, the grand final parade. And those buses, that the members or the non-members on the bus have to organise their own accommodation, because all buses leave Saturday night at about 9-10 p.m. from Melbourne and get into Adelaide about 9 a.m. Sunday morning. But, there's 50 seats per bus and there's 15 buses. So there's a lot of people going over. 10 buses are already full. And today our job is to process payments and to take bookings.
Oh, wow. So you said there's been thousands of messages and calls. So how many of you are working on facilitating all these requests to organise transport for the big day?
Well, there's a calling system, so you just happen to call through to me, but there's so many different phones and different committee members are just answering and getting through like that. But on the phone that I'm using alone, there's 741 messages that I haven't been able to get back to yet.
Oh, wow.
And the Vice President has had 912 missed calls. It's just hectic.
Oh, jeez.
And you're not guaranteed to get through first shot. People are just calling until they get through, and that's how it works.
Okay, and in terms of the buzz with the supporter group and all the Crows fans, how is it all at the? How are they all feeling given that Adelaide are back in the grand final?
Oh, everyone's very excited, but everyone's also very, very tired as well because they've been working since Friday night. So yeah, I think it's a bit of excitement and exhaustion, but no, absolutely, everyone's very, very excited, and everyone on the committee have got tickets, so they're all going to be there. So yeah, it's all very, very exciting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the last for sure, yeah. Well, the last grand final Adelaide took part in was back in 1998 when they beat North Melbourne. So what are everyone's expectations come this Saturday?
I don't think there's any expectations really. It's been a long time since we made the grand final. I think it's just one of excitement, to be honest. There's no expectations going in. Obviously, we want to win, but everyone's just proud. With everything that the boys have been through in the past 3 years, to make it to a grand final is just the excitement of being there at the moment. Obviously we want to win and we want to get the job done, but it's just one of absolute excitement, and hopefully, the boys can, get it done, because it's just, I think it's just, only way to describe it is one of just sheer excitement.
Yeah, for
enjoy.
sure. Oh, that's great. That's great. And looking at the grand final week, are there any other festivities that the supporter group will take part in, like by the time you arrive in Melbourne and onwards?
Not that we know of yet. I mean, there've been different news stations that have come up and recorded and whatnot, what we've been doing, but we don't know yet. We find out different things each day.
Okay. Yeah. And what's your prediction for the game, and who do you think will take home the Norm Smith?
I think we'll win by maybe 10 to 20 points. And I reckon Eddie Betts or Rory Sloan will get Norm Smith.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Is my prediction.
Nice. All right. We'll find out on Saturday. And do you have any
exactly right.
And do you have any final comments for our listeners in regards to the Adelaide Crows supporters group and enjoying the footy this weekend?
Just soak up every day that it comes. We're counting down the days, 4 days until I drive over with friends. Just soak it up and enjoy it, because it really is a very special time for us as a club.
Fantastic. And for anyone who wants to join the Adelaide Crows supporters group, or also catch you online, how can they do that?
Well, at the moment, you actually can't join the Crow supporter group because it was closed off in August because we have over 700 members. But next year, people can join. Again, it'll be reopened.
And you've got social media for the supporters group?
Yeah. There's a Crow supporter group Facebook page and a Crow supporter group Twitter page. And, yeah, the one that you most likely wanted to look at is on Facebook, Adelaide Crow supporter group, and it's fantastic. Has all the information.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for your insight today, Kate.
No worries.
We certainly look forward to Saturday.
Yeah, no worries. No worries at all.
Great to hear from Kate. And how about 912 missed calls? Unbelievable. We now continue our analysis on Adelaide versus Richmond and speak to, if not the longest, certainly one of the longest serving active hosts of an AFL television program. He is host of the Marngrook Footy Show on NITV. Here is Grant Hansen. Hi Grant, thanks for joining us on the show. We certainly look forward to hearing your perspective on the biggest game of the season.
Thanks for having me.
No worries at all. So, we've now arrived at Grand Final week. It's the Adelaide Crows versus the Richmond Tigers. What are your thoughts on how we've gotten to this position?
Oh, look, I think it's been a fantastic season. It's great to see the Tigers getting the opportunity to play off in the Grand Final. It's been 37 years since they've won a flag, so it's great for their supporters, and I think it's great for AFL football in general that a side like Richmond, like the Bulldogs the year before, haven't won a flag for some time, and now they've got the opportunity to do so. And then on the other hand, look at Adelaide. They've been in great form all year. They finish on top of the ladder, and you never finish on top unless you're a good side. So they haven't won a flag for 10 years themselves. So I think it's going to be a fantastic grand final. I'm really excited about it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's certainly going to be huge. With Richmond, they came into the season, I guess, considered by many to be no chance of reaching September, let alone the grand final. What is it about the Tigers that gave them this perception in the first place that they were no chance of being a finals contender? And what have they done to get themselves to the last Saturday of September?
Look, I think there was a couple of strategic moves off the field to get Justin Leppich back at the club and also Neil Baum. I think there are two huge inclusions that have helped steady the club and steady the ship. The president had stuck with the coach, so that was another thing in their favour, that they stuck with Damien Hardwick. And I think Baum and Leppich have brought some good stuff to the club. Also, Craig McRae, former Brisbane player, has brought something to the club as well off the field. So I think they've got a good coaching panel as well this year. And, they didn't do themselves any favour because prior to this year, they hadn't been playing well. So people quickly were quick to point the finger at them saying that they were underachievers and they hadn't been playing well for a number of years. So to be able to turn that around is a credit to the club and a credit to the playing group, and I'm sure their supporters are delighted the way that they're playing at the moment. And I think the small forward line and a couple of young kids have brought some enthusiasm into the side this year. That's why they're playing so well.
Yeah, it's great. Great to see. Certainly, they've made a big difference from their performance compared to last year. So, in terms of Adelaide, they came into this year off a rather successful 2016 with their first season with their coach Don Pike. What do you attribute the growth in their success this year after they bowed out at the semi-final stage last year?
Well, look, I think they'll be smarting from losing last year, and they're a very well-balanced side. They've obviously got that emotional input as well with their former coach, Philip Walsh, being murdered and getting a bit of momentum from the emotional factor concerning his passing. I think that's a significant factor in them wanting to turn things around again this year. But they are a very well-balanced football side. They have stars in every line. And I think last year getting beat is going to give them that extra momentum this year to go a little bit further than what they did last year.
Now that they're minor premier and they've hosted both their finals in this campaign, the qualifying final against GWS and last Friday their preliminary final against Geelong, do you think that now heading to the MCG to play in the grand final against Richmond, who have made that cauldron-like atmosphere with their supporters at the ground, is that going to be a challenge for them come Saturday?
I wouldn't think so. I mean, Adelaide have won premierships in the past and they've played games at the MCG, and they've got a lot of big occasion players there. Eddie Betts loves a big stage, so does the captain Taylor Walker, so does Jenkins. Big Jacobs played on the MCG numerous times with Carlton. A lot of those boys are very familiar with the MCG, and I don't think that will be any deterrent for them whatsoever. I think they'll be looking forward to playing at the MCG in front of 100,000 people, bearing in mind there'll be at least over 30,000 Adelaide Crow supporters there, and plus there'll be some neutral supporters as well. But I don't think that the MCG will be any hindrance for them whatsoever. I think they'll look forward to that challenge, and I don't think that they'll be too worried about playing the game at the best stadium in the world.
Yeah. Well, certainly the home of football. Looking at yourself, you're the host of the Marngrook Footy Show. Grand Final week this week for you guys. What are the plans for this show coming up this week?
Well, we got KB, Kevin Bartlett and Robert Walls, two legends of AFL football, that will be on our panel this week. We've got also Wayne Schwartz, the former North Melbourne and Sydney Swan star, coming in. We've got Tanya Hotch from the AFL, who's the inclusion officer. Then we've also got Patrick Cripps, the former, the current Carlton star, coming into the show as well. We'll be announcing the Marngrook Player of the Year. So it's a big show coming your way, as it is every week, and obviously we'll be into the spirit of the grand final. We're looking forward to a big show.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, we can't wait. In terms of looking at some of the talent that will be participating on the weekend, let's look at Charlie Cameron to start with. He dominated on Friday night against Geelong. Do you think that, given the grand final stage, he can replicate that level of performance come Saturday?
Oh, no doubt. That won't be a problem for him at all. I mean, they've got probably the best forward line in the competition. You stop Charlie Cameron, they've got to stop Eddie Betts, they've got to stop Jenkins, they've got to stop Lynch, they've got to stop Taylor Walker. There's no other forward line in the competition that really can compare to Adelaide. So they might stop Charlie Cameron, but there's 5 other guys up there they've got to worry about as well. I think that's going to be Richmond's biggest problem, is to quell that forward line and stop him kicking goals. I think if Richmond have got a chink in their armour, it's their back line against some quality opposition such as Adelaide. I think the Richmond defenders are really going to have their hands full.
Yeah. And looking at one of their big names, Eddie Betts, do you feel that, given he played at Carlton for so long and then now he's come across to Adelaide and his career's now taken itself to newer and greater heights, that this could be the signature moment on his career?
Oh, look, I think that, he's been able to kick 50 goals the last 4 seasons in a row as a small forward pocket-type player, so that's a magnificent feat in modern-day football, that's for sure. He's very popular, he's a very likeable type of player to watch, he's very unselfish, he gives off the ball when he should, and I think that Eddie will be loving playing off in the grand final. Every player that's listed on an AFL list all want to play in the big one in September, and Eddie will be no different, but certainly it's a long time coming for him. He played at Carlton when there was a lot of doom and gloom around at the moment, and a lot of people still shake their heads about Carlton letting him go. But look, he's got to Adelaide. He's become a much better player, and I think when Eddie retires, I've said this before on the show, that Eddie Betts will go down as one of the best Indigenous players of all time to play AFL football.
That's huge. Yeah, it's certainly great to see him really dominating up there in the forward line for the Crows. In terms of Adelaide and their midfield, looking at what they have to offer with their stars in the midfield, how do they match up against the Richmond and their highly talented midfield?
Oh, look, I think Richmond's midfield's got two, really, is Cochin and Martin, whereas Adelaide's probably got 4 or 5 midfielders that are very high-quality players as well. So there's going to be resting on the shoulders of Cochin and Martin to play well, but obviously Adelaide's going to probably tag both of them. They've got good taggers. The Crouch brothers do a really good job at doing that. So if they can keep Martin and Cochin down to, 12, 14 possessions, and Adelaide midfield get on top early, I think they might open up the floodgates halfway through that third quarter.
Richmond, they've also got some star players up in their forward line. You look at, on the weekend, we saw Daniel Rioli kick 4 goals. Do you think that could be a breakout moment for him in his career, and he could take that form into the grand final?
I'd love to see him do it. The chance of him doing that again will be rather difficult, because Adelaide have got a great half-back line, and it's probably been the best half-back line in the competition all year. So I think that Rioli, obviously they'll be closely watching him this week. They won't want him to get off the leash. Jack Greenwald was very disappointing on the weekend, got badly beaten by Davis from GWS. So I'm a bit worried about their forward line structure, actually. If you stop Greenwald and you stop Rioli, Contagna's a slippery little customer. He hasn't kicked a lot of goals the last 5 or 6 weeks. So I think Richmond, for them to win this game, everything has to go right for them, and I think it's going to be an uphill battle for them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I guess having the crowd support, do you think that could benefit them in terms of geeing them up for the occasion?
Look, it might be worth a couple of goals, but once the players get out onto the ground, they don't hear a lot of the noise. So I don't think that's going to be a significant factor in this game. I think what's going to be significant is the side that plays the best football and keeps to their structures and don't get overawed by the occasion. And I think Adelaide have a lot of quality professional players that have been around the AFL system for a long time in comparison to Richmond. Got a lot of young guys that have only played a handful of games, that probably haven't played more than 20 games, most of them. So they've only got a handful of experienced players, and I think anything when it comes to the crunch, that like most things in life, you can't beat experience. And I think the Adelaide Crows have experience right over the whole board. And I'd expect Adelaide to win this game, probably around about 5 goals. But the Tigers have given themselves a good account, but I can't see them beating Adelaide Crows on the weekend.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting call. I guess Adelaide are the favourite and have really performed up to the minor premier standards throughout the final series. In terms of key matchups on the day, we did discuss the midfield. Are there any other matchups you think that during the course of the game that will be pivotal in shaping whether one side takes the edge?
Well, look, I think there'll be great matchups all over the ground. I think Taylor and Ramps will be a very good matchup there. Also Jacobs and Nankervis in the ruck will be another one. So there'll be good matchups all across the ground, really. I mean, both sides will be trying to nullify champion players on either side. So Rioli will get tagged, Machete Betts will get tagged. As I say, there's not too many, you can't tag everyone because Adelaide's got stars everywhere, as Richmond have got a handful of stars compared to Adelaide Crows, who have got a significant number of great players everywhere across the ground. So I think that's, as I said, going to be Richmond's biggest problem, is trying to nullify so many good players with a handful of young, experienced guys in a big game like this at the MCG on Grand Final day. So that's why I think Richmond are going to have big problems on the day, because they just don't have the same amount of talent to cover the Adelaide Crows.
Okay. Yeah. Well, with Richmond's other players, say guys like Shane Edwards, Brandon Ellis, Sean Grigg, do you think that those guys across the field can also impose themselves on the contest?
Maybe. Well, obviously they're going to try and give themselves a good account, but those three guys that you mentioned, I mean, would they be in the top 10 draft picks if they're into another club next year? Probably not. Would they get a game in Adelaide, those three guys? Possibly. Maybe one or two of them, maybe just one of them. So if you compare them like that, well, they're probably not at the same standard as what their Adelaide counterparts are. But in saying that, they've obviously played good football this year to be able to get where they are, so they can't be underestimated. The thing that Richmond do have going in their favour is momentum. They're up and about, they're all playing for each other, and like the Western Bulldogs last year, a lot of those guys didn't have a lot of experience, but when it came to the big day, they played for each other. And I think that's what the Tigers have got going from at this stage, is that they're playing for each other. And if they can do that on Saturday, they'll give themselves some good account of possibly winning the game. But as I said, for the Tigers to win, everything going to have to go right for them.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll find out Saturday. Did mention earlier your prediction, and you're saying Adelaide by 5 goals thereabouts. Could you give us a smoky pick for the Norm Smith medal from each side?
Okay, Norm Smith medalist for the Tigers could be... That's a very good question, that. It might be, a smoky. Very good question, that one. Maybe Edwards for Richmond. And for Adelaide, I think Eddie Betts.
Okay, cool. And as far as that of the favourites, most of the midfielders dominate the favourites for the Norm Smith. So who would be your pick for the Norm Smith medal out of the whole list of 44 players taking the field?
It's a very good question. I wish I was psychic, but I'd think, it's very difficult to... maybe Rory Sloane.
All right, well, we'll find out come Saturday. And in terms of Melbourne and it buzzing this week, what can you tell our listeners to expect in terms of the whole atmosphere in Melbourne for Grand Final week?
Oh, look, it's obviously huge. We've got a public holiday as a result of the Grand Final being played at the mighty MCG, and the whole town is buzzing. You only have to drive through Richmond to see yellow and black everywhere. So, the Tiger faithful are full of anticipation, and quite right, so they should be. They'll be looking at the Dogs last year winning the Grand Final, thinking they could do the same thing, and why not? Why wouldn't you? And as I said, they're up and about, but the Grand Final week is just full of anticipation, excitement. The Brownlow medal happens. They've got the motorcade on the Friday. The place just gets to a crescendo by the time Saturday rolls on. So it's going to be a sold-out crowd at the MCG. There'll be thousands and thousands of people everywhere, right across the country. It basically comes to a standstill. So it's a huge game. Great to see two different clubs that haven't played in the Grand Final for a long time. So that all adds and beckons for, a fantastic Grand Final day.
Fantastic. Yeah, we can't wait. And it's going to keep building and building throughout the course of the week. Thank you so much for your time today, Grant. It's been great to get your perspective on the big game. Any final words you'd like to say in relation to the Marngrook show and what we come to expect on Thursday night and on Saturday with the Grand Final?
Yeah, look, just thank you to all the people that tune in every week and watch the Marngrook football show. It's become one of the popular football shows on TV, and without the fans watching it, the show wouldn't be as good as what it is. So thank you to all the fans. And on Saturday, for all the Richmond faithful and all the Adelaide Crows supporters, may the best team win.
yeah, that's right. And we'll find out late Saturday afternoon. And thank you once again for joining us, Grant.
Thanks for your time.
Terrific to hear from Grant. And so far, we have had all of our guests going with the Crows. So, to balance things out a bit, it might be a good idea for us to hear from our next guest. We speak to Alice Ho from the Precinct Hotel in Richmond to get a feel of the buzz in Richmond ahead of Saturday and what we can expect if we head down to catch the big game at the venue. Thanks for joining us, Alice. It's great to have you on the show.
No worries.
So, we're in Grand Final week. Richmond are playing in the Grand Final against Adelaide. So, what is the feeling in Richmond at the moment with the Tigers being in the Grand Final?
The buzz is pretty phenomenal. I'd say we were around on Saturday night, and it actually already seems like it was Grand Final day on Saturday with them getting into the big dance this Saturday. So everyone is really, really buzzed. Obviously, we've got you doing this podcast. Everyone's calling us. Everyone's wanting to come through. We've had more phone calls than ever before about Grand Final day, I'd have to say, in my years that I've worked here. So I think everyone's very, very excited.
Oh, wow. That's great. So tell us about the Precinct Hotel. Where are you located, and what services do you have in the venue?
So we're located just opposite Richmond train station. So you roll up to Richmond train station, walk straight out, and we're right there. So really walking distance to the MCG. What do? We do kind of everything, to be honest. Live music, live sport on the screens, great food, drinks, pretty much a little bit of everything here. So it's a one-stop shop and destination for anything, and the Grand Final is a really, really the biggest day of the year for us. So definitely lots of interest coming here to watch the game.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, looking at the Grand Final, what will be happening at the venue on the day?
So we don't do any packaged events or anything. It's free for all. We just want everyone to come in and have a really great day. So doors open from 10 a.m. and then we pretty much just show the game all through all of our screens throughout the day, and pop on live entertainment so that people can ensure that they're enjoying the day, and hopefully continue celebrations afterwards if Richmond do win. But if not, then hopefully they're going to stay on and have some sad drinks.
Yeah. So do you have to make a booking to go to the Precinct, or is it anyone can come in on the day?
Anyone can come in. So we're open nice and early, so we do generally get a bit of a line beforehand. So I would recommend coming in even earlier to line up and wait. And then once the doors are open, it's free for all, so everyone can just come in. Free entry, just, I guess, come in colours and have a good attitude.
Yeah, and what sort of crowds do you generally get on Grand Final day?
It's a little bit of everyone, to be honest. I think being in such a great suburb, you attract all types of people. You've got the Richmond locals. You've got the really big sports fanatics as well that come down. So I can't really pin it down to a certain type of demographic that we have here. It is all types of people that do come here. Yeah,
and in terms of numbers, how many people do you think will attend on the day?
To our venue, or that's hard to say, because it will be in and out. We'll get kind of a crowd come in to have something to eat before the game, and then they'll head down the road to the MCG because we're so close. But the whole venue, I mean, we fit up to 600 people in the venue. I would say we'll be at capacity throughout the whole day, people coming in and out. So, it'll be a really, really big day for everybody.
Yeah, for sure. And what other Grand Final related activity will you have at the venue during the week?
At this stage, we've got our colours out. We're really, really getting on board that the grand final parade on Friday is also a really big day for us, so we're putting on some live entertainment for that as well. But other than that, it's just really jumping on social media and getting people really excited when they're in the venue about the upcoming grand final.
Okay, and speaking of social media, what's the best ways for our listeners to connect with the Precinct Hotel?
Instagram, which is at Precinct_hotel, or else we're also on Facebook as the Precinct Hotel.
Okay, fantastic. And before we go, do you have a prediction for the game?
In terms of who's going to win, I would have to say Richmond. I think I'd get in trouble if I didn't say them. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for your insight into the Precinct Hotel. I'm sure you guys will have a terrific day there, and all the fans that come in will also. And I wish you all the best for the grand final.
Excellent. Thanks for having us.
Great to hear from Alice. The Precinct certainly sounds like an awesome place to not only catch the action on Saturday, but head to on Friday's public holiday after the grand final parade. So that's our show for today. The AFL Grand Final is upon us, and after hearing from our 4 guests today, cannot wait till Saturday to see it all unfold. Plenty to digest from all of our guests. I still can't get past the 912 missed calls, to be honest. So, before we go, let's recap some of the things to do before Saturday that we learnt from our guests. Listen to the Footyology Grand Final podcast if you haven't already, and head to footyology.com.au to check out all Rohan's write-ups ahead of the game. Check out the Adelaide Crows Supporters Group Facebook page to be kept up to date with them. Tune in to the Marngrook Footy Show this Thursday at 7:30pm for their grand final special. And if you want to watch the big game on Saturday at a venue full of footy fans, head to the Precinct Hotel in Richmond to watch all the action live and loud. Thanks to all our guests, and thank you for listening. To keep up to date with the SportsBar Life, follow us on Twitter and Facebook at SportsBar Life. And feel free to post a comment on the page you have found this episode to tell your thoughts and predictions on this weekend's game. That's all for today. Till next time.